Welcome back to The Final Whistle podcast. Probably our last one, high school football-wise, of the season, as we are here to talk about the Kendrick Tigers winning yet another state title as they beat Logos. And there's proof of our front cover from Friday. Both Cody and Sam were at the game. And we'll just turn it over to you, Cody, first. Tell us a little bit about it.
Right. So this was a special one to, be on the gamer for, as, I've been following Kendrick Tigers football for a long time now. I've, been here since they started their reign. And, of course, I have seldom had the chance to see them in real life, normally spending my Friday nights, cooped up in our office, doing the remote work. It was really a special evening. They got to play in the Kibbie Dome. A huge turnout from both fandoms, the Logos Knights and the Kendrick Tigers. Kendrick wins 54-26, within a possession for both teams at the same score as their previous meeting, 48-24 in Kendrick's favor. But it had a significantly different progression. The first time they met this season, Logos actually had the lead at intermission, 16-14, before Kendrick nosed ahead in the third quarter and then ran off with it in the fourth. This time it was Kendrick starting fast, Logos having the stirrings of a rally mid-game, and then Kendrick powering away again late. Kendrick had a 20-point run in the first two quarters, then another 20-point run in the fourth quarter, and those two things really put the Tigers out of reach, in spite of the Knights' valiant efforts. One term that Logos coach Nick Holloway used was explosiveness. He said his team wasn't quite as explosive, and you could say the Tigers, they're explosive, all right? I covered both their semifinal against the Grace Grizzlies and their final against Logos, and both times it was remarkable the way, if Kendrick got the ball, something was going to happen. It was amazing how quickly the ball would just, fly down the field when the Tigers had it. They're a great passing team. They're a great rushing team. They're athletes in every respect, and they have clearly honed their game to a remarkable degree. I think in some respects, this was the single best of Kendrick's 5 state title winning seasons. Maybe I'll launch into some statistics I've been adding up a little later in this.
And we should emphasize that 5 straight state titles for Kendrick.
Yes. Yeah. 5 straight. Their second straight since moving up to Idaho Class 2A. This season is significantly more dominant than last season. Last season, they actually had dropped one to Logos. Logos, a very strong, really, I think it's been a strong second-best team in the division for a while, in spite of having dropped one upset to Cami, which was later avenged. So, if there was one team that could have challenged Kendrick, it was going to be Logos. Logos actually scored more than half the total points on Kendrick this season and held Kendrick to its 2 lowest scoring totals, but still didn't even make the games very close. That is how superior the Tigers are, how unrivaled they are. I feel like they're a small school team that, if you ask them to play 11-man and play some of the bigger divisions, if we put them on with the Lewiston Bengals, I'm not sure could they compete. Seems like maybe they could. That's what I think.
Yeah, it's certainly make it interesting.
Yes. So... And again, it's the same small group of guys, the same guys who led the team, the previous years, the guys who led the boys basketball team and the baseball team, Maddox, Kirkland, a lot of these guys. Again, being in a state final does not faze them. I feel like they were not slowed down. They were not nervous. They didn't feel, they felt very little pressure. I'm sure they were somewhat nervous, but really, they're a well-oiled machine. They have had this momentum that has been going and going and going. They have these strong sporting families, a number of them at this point. These families that they keep having new, heirs to their family legacy come up and fill important spots on the roster. And I think more of them are coming. I don't see this stopping, by the way, as we'll talk about later. Sam, you having also been there, what do you? But do you want?
Well, I was going to say, that's probably a good point to get into some of these guys. Let's talk about some of their stats here. Mm-hmm. Sam, why don't you highlight, if you can find them amid our stories here, who were some of those stat leaders for Kendrick in the game?
Tanner Clevenhagen was Kendrick's lead rusher, 11 carries for 100 119 yards. Ryan Stewart of 6 for 51. You had Cade Silflo, who was a force on the ground of 2 carries for 37 yards, including a touchdown run, a 33-yard touchdown run for the Tigers' first touchdown. Yeah. Though he was also a force through the air with 6 catches for 91 yards, including another receiving touchdown in that sense. And so Nathan Tweit was the star through the air for the Tigers, 6 catches for 113 yards.
And 2 touchdowns.
Yeah.
I also note Tweit with the critical interception. I thought that was a big moment in the game when it was the third quarter and the Knights were pressing. They had the momentum. It felt like there could be a comeback in the works, just conceivably. And then they had made a rare move. The Knights had, because normally they're more of a rushing, specialized team, and that's the big contrast between them. Kendrick is, if anything, more of a passing team than a rushing team, but it's great at both. I'd say that's what my sense of it. And Logos, almost entirely rushing. The Knights switched it up and tried for a passing touchdown there third quarter. They had one incompletion where that almost looked like, to me, it could have been called good. Like they slipped out of the Logos player's hands just as he was falling. I thought he might have had control. And then play later, they're going for another end zone pass, and Tweit intercepts it for the turnover, and then the Tigers went on to score. And that I thought was a major turning point. So he was receiving even when the pass wasn't to him. So you want to talk? You wrote a whole article about Nathan Tweit.
Indeed,
by the way.
yeah. Nathan Tweit, obviously had a read on Joseph Sensing's arm, was watching his eyes and was able to make a play, like you said, on the ball in the end zone. And then what did Kendrick do? They took the ball and it just seemed to happen in an instant. Like 6 or so plays, Cade Silflo caught a huge pass over the middle of the field and then caught the touchdown later, just about 2 minutes later. And so those are the kind of momentum plays where Logos could have easily, out of halftime, clawed their way deeper, closer within to the Tigers, and it was the Tigers that pulled away.
In fact, I think that particular juncture was when it was 20-8, right out of intermission for Kendrick. Then that interception led to a 26-8 Kendrick lead. They got all the way to 34-8. And then Logos still wound up making something of a push because they made the 12 straight points to end the third quarter, at 34-20 down. 34-20, Logos has scored 12 straight. It felt like maybe Logos could carry that over and make it close. And then Kendrick slams the door. First play of the fourth quarter was Tanner Clemenhagen breaking loose. The guy who is also a hockey star, missed his junior year with the Tigers to go to a hockey academy, as I recall. And, something they've been saying is that his hockey moves benefit him. They show up on the football field.
Definitely some characters on this Kendrick team with, you got hockey players like him. You got, Nathan Tweit coming back from missing an entire year with an injury, which I'm sure you'll talk a little bit more about, Sam. But coming back and not missing a step. He was player of the year in the league, is that right?
Yeah, 2A White Pine League.
And you got guys like Maddox Kirkland are following in his predecessor's footsteps, quarterback from his freshman year on, just like his coach Ty Koepp was, if I'm not mistaken there.
Well, he took over because Koepp graduated 2 years ago, so Kirkland
was
took
it
over.
Sophomore year?
Kirkland would have taken over as a sophomore.
Okay, so several year starter for those guys, starting as a young guy. He definitely reminds me of Koepp. Yeah. But him, great career for him. And you could go on and on, but you want to talk a little bit more about Tweit, Sam?
Yeah,
a little story on him.
That's definitely that's the exciting thing about these Tigers is that you have, kind of the passing of the torch. You had Ty Koepp passing the torch to Max Kirkland. You had Sawyer Hewitt passing the torch to Tanner Clemenhagen, and then of course Clemenhagen and then Nathan Tweit for different reasons missed most of, if not all of, last season. And the Tigers still won the championship last year with the talent that they had, and they come back and they step into these prominent roles. Nathan Tweit, as he told our reporter Cody Wentz 4 years ago when he was in 8th grade, he was the best water boy in the state, self-proclaimed. And he certainly
he led the Tigers to the title that season. So,
Indeed, he was
keeping them hydrated.
Keeping the champions hydrated. So there's certainly the stats to back it up. And so, from best water boy to player of the year in the White Pine League, and effectively, player of the year in the state, playing for the state champion. And so that's just an incredible journey to be out like that and then to work his way back. And it was his girlfriend, Emma Krogh. He credited her family of connecting him with great physical therapists and doctors out of Boise, so he could recover and get back on the field.
Actually, I believe there is an all-state team traditionally. I'm curious, actually. Nathan Tweit might be a contender. I would think Maddox Kirkland might be a contender for Player of the Year at the state level. Actually, Nathan Tweit is a former Idaho Class 1A Division II, before it was just called Class 1A, Player of the Year for boys basketball when the Tigers won state couple of years back. So he missed last year. He would have been the 2023 season, I believe. His sophomore year, he won Player of the Year for boys basketball after leading the Tigers to the state title, high scorer, dominant, inside shooter, and missed last year. And, of course, the Tigers still won state. Boys basketball. So we'll see. I think there's a very good chance they're winning another boys basketball title to come. I'm just going to, the multi-sport crossover nature of this phenomenon is also fascinating to me. Again, football is the flagship. Football is their ultimate stronghold. In fact, I'll spout some more statistics. I've just been adding up. So according to what I have here, Kendrick has actually gone 44-1 collectively in its last 4 seasons. It's been 53-3 in the 5 seasons it's won state. Its first year winning state, 2021, the Tigers actually dropped 2 games early to mid-season against strong opponents before having a late season surge to the title. Then they've been dominant ever since. They've, like I said, 4 seasons in a row with 3 of them undefeated, one with 1 loss. The fact that last year was their first season moving up from 1A to 2A, and there was a bit of a dip in terms of just how purely dominant they were. They had 1 loss to Logos, and overall they gave up more points. And by my count, they scored 684 points and had 144 scored against them last year in 12 games. This year in 12 games, scoring 893 points and having 92 scored against them while going undefeated. So that's a gain of over 200 points scored from last year and cutting over 50 points against. In fact, according to what I've added up here, Kendrick, they had the single best ratio of points scored relative to points against in their 5 consecutive state title seasons this year, which comports with what their coach and former quarterback Ty Koepp said at the post-game ceremony. He said he thinks this is the very best of those 5 state title-winning seasons.
And I would agree. Yeah, I would agree with him. And I think your stats that you're saying back it up. So nothing controversial there. But I think that maybe kind of brings me to one of the points I wanted to say is I think this might be not only Kendrick's best football team they've had in this run of their dynasty football runs here, but maybe one of the best in the area that I've ever covered in covering high school sports for almost 15 years. Just such a dominant season for these Tigers. The most narrow games, still almost doubling up their opponents.
Yeah.
And several shutouts, and again, just all the stats you just went over. I'm trying to think of anybody that would even come close to these guys, and you'd have to maybe you just compare them to other Kendrick teams, and we just did that, and they're kind of the best. The only thing I can think of is Lapway boys basketball is very, very good in different eras. Even just their most recent one, looking at some of those Lapway boys basketball teams that had Case Wynot and Titus Yearout, who are Yearout's on the Vandals right now, Idaho Vandals, and then Case Wynot is on the Washington State Cougs right now. A couple of those teams in the early 2020s went undefeated, won multiple state titles. Definitely got it. Maybe one of those teams could be considered the best single season team in our area, especially when you consider those 2 guys on those teams. I'm thinking all the way back to when I was covering sports in Alaska, and there was a girl named Alyssa Peely who's now in the WNBA with the Los Angeles Sparks, played college at USC in Utah. She led Diamond High School to back-to-back state titles. They had an undefeated season. I believe it was 2017-18 when they went undefeated in the start of back-to-back state titles for them. That's another team that comes to mind. But there's not a lot that you could compare to this Kendrick football team. was just so dominant this year.
Right. I'm just looking up the statistics. I'm thinking Lapwai basketball, the 2021 to 22 season was probably their absolute height. That was when Year Out would have been a senior and Why Not would have been a sophomore.
And this would be a good story to maybe pick a couple of these years and just kind of compare them and
right.
put them all in a single story.
What I'm seeing here is
about.
they were 27-0 that year. They did have a game as close as 59-53 against St. Mary's. So that's, I mean, of
St.
course,
Mary.
it's a different sport. And I will say they played a lot of larger division teams. I mean, here
beat some big schools.
They beat Lewiston 81-63 straight out. They beat Clarkston 76-52.
And Kendrick can't play bigger schools like that because it's different.
It's 8-man.
It's 8-man versus 11-man. So.
Exactly. So it's hard to compare to some extent. Like Lapwai was going out there taking on the biggest division teams it could find and still beating them all.
Yeah.
Kendrick, I kind of feel like the Tigers might do that if we could make these other people play 8-man or something, or I don't know. I'm not sure how they would adapt to 11-man exactly, but it's
pound for pound, you got to consider it.
So it's hard sometimes to translate from sport to sport. Certainly this is by 100 miles the most dominant high school football dynasty since any of us have been around in this area. I think it's
and probably for decades before.
Yes, in fact, I've looked at these lists of high school football champions for past stories and what have they have them on idhsaa.com.
Right.
I'm very certain no team in any classification, and if this turns out to be wrong, please pie me or something in a future Tribune short. No other high school football team in any classification in the history of the state of Idaho has won 5 straight titles. So,
And it's worth noting, and obviously a huge deal, that the Tigers won their 5th title with a first-year head coach, as we mentioned before.
And the youngest coach.
And the youngest coach.
And a 3-time state title winning quarterback from this same 5-title run we're talking about.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. So Ty Koepp, the 20-year-old head coach, we've talked about him. We've referred to him, of course, throughout the season and throughout this podcast. As Cody said, won 3 straight state titles as their quarterback. Graduated, sat out a year, missed it so much. And then when Zane Hobart took the Lewiston High School head coach job this year, Ty Koepp stepped in and took the reins of the Tiger football. And they did not miss a beat. Obviously, many of his star players, were teammates of his, including his quarterback Max Kirkland was his backup 2 years ago,
including Nathan Tweit and Kate Silflo and Clement Hagan. Almost all these guys knew him quite well.
Yeah, and so there's an interesting dynamic of hey, this is one of their best friends, so they're one of their former teammates. Now he's their head coach, but the thing is, he demanded so much respect and admiration while he was a player, while he was in wearing a helmet and uniform on the gridiron, that it's an easy transition to the headset, and it's kind of a similar. Obviously, there's a little bit of a change dynamic, but everybody buys in, and there's not much of a change there.
I'd probably prefer to say that he commanded the respect. You say demands respect, it sounds like someone who doesn't deserve it and is, overbearing.
That's true.
Commanding respect.
I agree.
It's what you do without demanding it. It's what you do by deserving it.
Indeed.
So, in fact, what you're saying there, I had a quote to this effect in my article. I've just looking at now from our friend Nathan Tweit. He's honestly one of my best friends, Tweit said. This guy's been scouting games, he's been scouting teams, and he can tell you any score from any game. He's just a football IQ genius. I can't even say anything else about him. He's insane.
He sure is.
So, I think also being only 20 and having this extremely promising start, it's tantalizing to imagine whether Ty Koepp might stick with this job. He could be at it for 50 years. And at some point in that stretch, will the Tigers begin losing?
It's hard to hard to imagine right now.
Yeah, I mean that's a great quote there. Almost probably a good spot to start wrapping this up here. As far as I don't know if you can say any more about Kendrick here. One other small thing, just a shout out to the fans of both teams. You guys said the crowds were great. A lot of small school football, but big crowds at the Kibbie Dome, and a lot of not just big crowds, but a lot of just good cheering and chants and various things.
I got in some quality interviews and things with the fans and the middle school cheerleaders who apparently aspire to form a high school cheer team for the Tigers. So,
there you go.
Some of that might also be followed up on in future Tribune materials.
Yeah, there's a lot of love in the White Pine League, and especially among the Kendrick community, because these guys, their fans, their families, their friends, they don't support the Tigers just because they're good at football. The kind of the consensus is they support them because they're good people, they're good neighbors, they're good kids. In fact, in our Nathan Tweit story on Facebook, you got like 10 comments saying, "Man, he's a good person," and that's exactly what Maddox Kirkland said. Not only best water boy, best athlete, but and great teammate, but great person to be around, great friend. And so Max Kirkland called him one of the nicest guys on the team.
I had a friend of his approach me and say things to that effect, unsolicited in the middle of the game. So. Yes. And he was saying also that he felt what did he call them? Carb nights, the carb dinners, where they'd eat spaghetti. Those were the nights where they bonded, and it created such this, and I remember nights like that from high school cross country, this sort of thing. So I could say that's, It's a touching story also in many ways. One more comment actually on the Koepps. I didn't get into my story, but Ty Koepp has his younger brother Colt Koepp, another example of the family ties here on the team. Colt was a senior this year. During the post-game ceremony, Ty was getting sentimental, and he said, "I was such a privilege to be able to coach you this year, my brother." And he said, "Our grandpa Skip would be proud of you." And their grandpa Skip apparently passed away this season, and it moved Colt Koepp to tears to hear that from his brother. One of the many human moments from the sometimes inhuman seeming Kendrick Tigers.
Great way to end that. And I guess it's not ending it though, because we want to look ahead to next year, where both these teams where will they be playing, Cody?
Right.
In different classifications?
Yes, indeed. So it was Logos coach Nick Holloway, who again, had his own tremendous season with guys, actually 7 new starters from his 8-man lineup that still replicated the results from last year and the year before. Logos, a new program that has shot to the top and has shown real durability. But they have a new challenge in front of them as they are moving up to Class 3A next year, where they will be competing in 11-man football. In fact, we will not see, to whatever extent you could say there was a Logos-Kendrick rivalry. Certainly it was the closest thing that Kendrick had to a rivalry. It will not be continuing next year, apparently, unless one of them wants to cross that 8-man, 11-man divide, as Logos joining the Central Idaho League. 3A Central Idaho League will be competing with teams like Orofino, Grangeville, St. Mary's, in that particular conference. And I personally feel the Knights are very likely to find success there. In fact, their JV defeated the Orofino varsity in a game earlier this season. So I think Logos and they have a huge bench. They have, something like 50 guys turn out per year, more than half their male student body. So I think they'll be a threat. They will do just fine at 3A. Meanwhile, the Kendrick Tigers dropping back down to 1A. This is shocking news. One might think that if anyone was going to be promoted to 3A, it would be Kendrick, you see. But no, apparently because these things are done based on school enrollment numbers and they don't pay any attention to your results, the Tigers, after just 2 years of, proving themselves at the 2A level, are going back down to 1A, where, I don't want to be too presumptuous, get too far ahead of myself, but, it is almost terrifying to think what will happen. It's hard to imagine the games we're going to see with the Kendrick Tigers back competing against all, the 1A league opposition.
A lot of these players we've talked about will not be on the team, right, as they're seniors, but hard to imagine Kendrick not dominating 1A as they had.
Yeah.
And they dominated 2A, 1A doesn't seem to matter for them.
They may be losing Tweit, Rotsasunder, Kilsilflo, etc. But they're bringing back Maddox Kirkland, Maddox's brother Hudson Kirkland, Hank Heimgartner, the relief quarterback who had success this season. They're bringing back a lot of guys, a lot of quality guys.
And this is he's several years away, but I talked to Maddox Kirkland's 12-year-old cousin.
Oh.
He was in the stands, front row, and
there you go.
Sure. Like you said, all these families are pretty big. And so
I talked to a Bo Silflo, who is about 12 or so.
Oh, there we go.
Who is, I suspect we'll be hearing
Future
more about in
Tigers.
years to come. Yes,
Yeah.
but yeah, it's true. It won't be exactly the same team. Possibly they'll, I don't think they will get too much weaker. This is what I think.
But it opens things up in 2A. I mean, it's going to be guaranteed to be a two new teams in the championship next year. Maybe a Kamei, maybe a Prairie back in the mix. So some stuff to think about there. But yeah, I think we'll start to wrap up here. Maybe switching to the Washington side, where we had one other team. Actually, our last team still alive was the Pomeroy Pirates, playing on Saturday. Of course, Kendrick and Logos played Thursday, and then the Pomeroy Pirates played in the Washington 1B quarterfinals on Saturday, where they did lose to Wakiakum of Catholimet. The final score of that game, 66-34. So another bit of a playoff run for Pomeroy, another great season for Pomeroy, but it will come to a close in the quarterfinals. They finished their season 10-2. Yeah, anything you guys want to say about the Pomeroy Pirates and their fantastic season?
Yeah, so I mean, Kaiser Harris, former prep athlete of the week. Obviously, he's a force for them. And today, he scored, was it 4?
3 touchdowns.
Three of their 5 touchdowns, right? And, he's somebody who's a force on the ground and a force of the air. And he just continued to perform. And this team is pretty deep.
Yes. So Harris, definitely a contender for the, leader in offensive yardage among all individuals in this region, as has been said on this program before. And so he finished his season. He finished his high school career in the, fitting fashion. He had 200 some yards rushing, and he had an interception return touchdown to boot. The Pirates. They've had a tendency to fall at this stage at state. They've been a strong team for a long time, but they're on the Washington side of the border. I'm actually curious what would happen if you put Pomeroy in with our top Idaho, 8-man teams. There doesn't seem to be very much Washington-Idaho crossover, but I'm curious what would happen. I feel probably they're a run-heavy team. They would probably lose to Kendrick in a similar fashion to Logos, I would think, look, Kendrick too complete for them would be my suspicion. But anyway, they've been very good for a long time. Every year they're putting up the big numbers, but they're in a state where there are a lot of schools. They are small schools, but there are so many of them that when you get to the state level, the playoffs, and then the last couple rounds,
Start getting further in the tournament.
you start
There's
running
some good
into really
teams.
good teams, and that's what happened to them last year. It's happened to them again. They lost the same round as last year, this year, to an undefeated team in Wakiakum. So nothing to hang their heads about per se, I think. And I believe they don't. Although Harris is a senior, I think they have some good younger talent at Pomeroy as well. Not quite as intimately, closely acquainted with their roster, but
definitely one of the most consistent programs.
credit to Kyle Kimball.
Yeah, Coach Kyle Kimball. He's bringing up a lot of the kids in that program. They're running the same systems in middle school and youth football, and then they just step right in, and they've been very consistent for many years now.
In fact, I'm reminded I talked to Wyatt Huey, a newcomer at Pomeroy, who I have proclaimed to be the next Kaiser Harris. So we're watching more of him.
Yeah. But yeah, it's been fun talking about high school football this year. This will be the last one for high school football. Of course, the Final Whistle podcast will continue throughout the whole winter and spring. It might go back to maybe Sam and Trevor talking other sports and some college sports and whatever. Maybe some guests. We'll have to see what the show looks like as it continues. But it's been fun talking high school football these past couple months. Any final words, Cody and Sam?
Athlete of the Week, Nathan Tweit.
All right.
I second that, yeah.
Well, all right. Well, he better get nominated then, I guess. And so for Cody and Sam and Trevor, who's not here, I'm Stefan. Thanks for watching the Final Whistle.
Hello and welcome back to another college football edition of the Final Whistle. I'm Lewiston Tribune Wazoo beat writer Sam Taylor here with our Idaho beat writer Trevor Junt. Trevor, how's it going?
Pretty good, Sam. How are you?
Pretty good. And it's the end of the road for the Idaho Vandals. WC Cougars got one more, potentially two more games left if they can win on Saturday. But let's start with the Vandals. They dropped a 37-16 contest to Idaho State. The Idaho State Bengals get to take the Potato State Trophy back with them to Pocatello. The trophy may stayed in Moscow, leaving Moscow for the first time, other than flying on the plane to the game in Pocatello last year. Anyway, but so this was quite the embarrassing defeat for the Vandals, and was it the first time since '81 that the Bengals had won in Moscow? Do you know that stat?
It's somewhere close to that, yeah.
Yeah, so first time in obviously our lifetimes and double our lifetimes since Idaho State had won in Moscow. How did it all happen?
Yeah, pretty brutal game. Really, the offense couldn't do anything. The offense couldn't move the ball. They couldn't score. Passing wise, I think they threw for 126 total yards in the game. Joshua Wood had 73 total yards. He got injured late in the second quarter. He hurt his throwing shoulder, his right shoulder, so he was out for the game for the second half. Sorrentini came in. He did okay. But yeah, the offense just couldn't move the ball. They couldn't run the ball. They couldn't pass the ball. That's why they failed. That's why they lost.
There was a point in the first half, rather, the defense was on the field for 18 minutes, was it, in the first half?
Yeah, it was something crazy. It was something.
Yeah.
In the first half, they were on the field for 18 minutes. Yes, as you said.
It's hard to win a game when you barely have the ball, and the defense to its credit, the Vandals were doing great on the defensive side of the ball for most of the game. I mean, it was 17. That's not like the greatest, but they were on the field for so long. And then there was a weird, there was a situation where Idaho State was kicking from the Vandals 35, essentially an onside kick. How did that happen?
So awesome. Never seen anything like that before in my life. So basically, on the extra point, Idaho was called for a unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, which is 15 yards.
Yeah.
And then a coach ran on the field, and he was called for an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty, and that's an extra 15 yards. So the ball got moved 30 yards to the Idaho 35. Idaho State kicked an onside kick and recovered it, and then scored the drive after. So
wow.
It was a pretty brutal series of events right there.
Definitely.
But just to talk about what's going on with the Vandals next, I would talk about my column a little bit, talking about keeping Idaho's core together and then also fixing the cracks that they may have. So a few things. Some coaching changes are happening. The defensive line coach announced today that he was leaving the Vandals. And then I do believe that a few other coaching changes might happen. I would expect a few guys to possibly be on the move. One guy, huge of note, Idaho legend, Matt Linehan, their offensive coordinator. He, can't confirm this for 100% positive, but he wasn't calling plays, most likely. He didn't have a play sheet for the past 2 weeks, hasn't really been with the whole offense. He's just coaching the quarterbacks. I asked for who was calling plays, and he said that he wasn't comfortable answering that question, which pretty much answers the question right there, that Linehan's not calling the plays. Because if he is calling the plays, you're just going to say, yeah, it's Linehan calling the plays. Yeah. So there's that. So I expect Linehan to be on the move, probably no longer with the Vandals, or move down to just a quarterbacks coach, but I don't expect that to happen. And then some players could be on the move. This is all from me. This is not from sources, but guys like Dylan Lane, guys like Matthias McClain, guys like Caleb Ricks, those guys could be on the move. Caleb Ricks is a true freshman cornerback. He's been locked down for most of the season. Matthias McClain's been playing like an all Big Sky player, and Dylan Lane has been the leader of the defense and leads the Vandals in tackles this season as well. So those are a few guys that could be on the move. And so Ford wants to look forward to the transfer portal and recruiting, basically.
Ford, as you noted in your column, Ford said he gave a pitch for why this group should stick together and how this team's going to be the hardest working team in America and the most bonded over the course of the offseason if they can stay together. What essentially is that pitch to his players for why they should stay? And obviously Idaho isn't doing revenue sharing like some of their conference competitors, Montana State, so they're behind the eight ball in that sense. But what kind of resources and what pitch does Coach Ford have for keeping this Vandal roster together?
So, I mean, one thing that Ford has harped on pretty much most of the season is how young of a group this is, and that's accurate. This is a group that hasn't really played a lot of snaps. Now, they're developing the players that have played 500 snaps to 1,000 snaps, and they're transitioning into being more experienced players. And when more experience comes and more time with a program comes, the more success you'll have. So his pitch basically is, you guys were young. We worked with you while you're young. You're just going to get better. And as time comes on, you're just going to get better and better and better. So stick with us. We're going to get you better, and we're going to be a better team. So that was basically his pitch to the team.
Yeah, and defensive coordinator Court Dennison had a lot of success this year for Idaho. They were just, obviously, Idaho, they come with Washington State. Obviously, the Washington State offense, as we'll talk about, hasn't had its own struggles, but week 1 was a very impressive showing against Washington State. San Jose State got away from them, but still that's a FBS competition. The Northern Colorado sticks out as a thorn, but everything else was pretty solid for the most part for the Vandal defense. What was Coach Dennison's trick to just unlocking this group and being a really kind of a shutdown unit all year?
I mean, pre-season, he was called a mastermind by multiple of his players. They're like, yeah, that guy's a genius. That guy's a mastermind. This guy knows what he's doing. He runs a 3-3-5 defense, so it's 3 defensive linemen, 3 linebackers, 5 quarterbacks and safeties. Sometimes he runs a 4-2-7. So one thing with Dennis is just like how kind of not complicated, but kind of exotic some of his play calls are. He says that he wants to simplify it as much as he can for this defensive unit and make it easier for them to understand, but also throw a lot of information at them and see how they respond, see how they respond to that. So probably just he's experienced. He was a really good linebacker at Washington, the University of Washington, and just knows what he's doing defensively. So that's why, I guess. But let's move on to WSU. So WSU loses to James Madison this week, 24-20. Tell me about that, Sam.
Yeah, it definitely felt like Groundhog Day. Familiar with that Bill Murray movie of it was just Washington State has just been stuck in a constant loop all season long. Once again, they traveled to the East Coast. Once again, to the Commonwealth of Virginia. Once again, losing a fourth quarter lead and then falling by less than a possession, this time falling 24-20 to number 21, James Madison, now number 20, James Madison in the AP Top 25 poll. And it was a situation where the Washington State defense was pretty stout all game long. The offense had some issues. Ziviekos threw a pick 6, and then the offense mustered just 3 points. Had only 3 possessions, but scored only 3 points in the second half. And the Cougar defense gave up 2 explosive plays, a 68-yard passing touchdown in the third quarter to James Madison, and then a 58-yard run by James Madison running back Wayne Knight. The Washington defense has been great, but they've been kind of gashed by these like standout running backs, Wayne Knight for James Madison, Anthony Hankerson for Oregon State, who they will meet again on Saturday. And so, while the Cougars have been great, they haven't been perfect defensively, and they've kind of needed to be perfect with the struggles that the offense has had.
Yeah, so basically, it's the story of the same thing every week with these top teams they're playing right now.
Yeah.
This defense is playing really well. The offense is struggling. One thing you said in your column is they've scored a third of their points in the second half. Why are they failing to have success in the second half?
I mean, just what your eyes tell you while watching it is that Danny Freund, the Wazoo's offensive coordinator, and the Cougars, they seem to just not trust their personnel. They don't necessarily trust Zevi to air it out and throw these deep passes. Zevi Eckhouse had this really excellent 48-yard touchdown completion to Tony Freeman in the second quarter. It was just beautiful. It would obviously, to do that, you got to obviously run to set the pass, so to say. But in the second half, especially in that first drive, Wazoo only ran 6 plays before they had to punt, and 5 of those plays were runs, one of which was a 10-yard run on 3rd and 9. So, I mean, that worked, I guess. But the other runs were just 1 yard or no gain. And then the pass was like a screen to the running back for a loss of 2. And so you had some really conservative play calling just right out of the gate in the second half that prevented them from doing anything with the ball. They moved just I forget the exact yard, but just they moved just to score a field goal in their second possession, and then they gained just 20 yards after they went down on their final possession. And so what you have is the case of, and we asked Rodgers about this on Monday, of just what he wants to see from Coach Freund, what he wants to see from his offense, and it's again and again he said he wants to be more aggressive in the second half. And they just haven't been as aggressive. And so when you're kind of playing not to lose rather than playing to win, and you're not necessarily putting, you're running on first and second down and facing these third and long situations, and then, throwing an incomplete pass and having to punt. It's a recipe for not scoring a lot. It's a recipe for having a bad offense. And unfortunately, they have had their success. Toledo, Louisiana Tech, those wins stand out for these long, 6.5-minute drives that the offense is able to put together. They've really been able to trust Kirby Voorhees, their running back, who has kind of taken on the starting role, to eat up those yards, to eat up that time, and to punch the ball into the end zone once or twice in the fourth quarter to ice those games. And in the games they've lost, they really haven't been able to do that.
Yeah, so with Freund, you kind of wrote in your column where it could be a possibility that he could be gone at the end of the season. How likely do you think that is?
I would say it's a coin flip, 50-50, because the case for him is that last year at South Dakota State, he's worked with Rogers for 2 years. Last year at South Dakota State, he had like the third, top 5 at least, offensive unit in all of FCS. They obviously went all the way to the semifinals, I believe, of the FCS playoffs, and some really key wins. And Mark Gronowski, who's the quarterback at Iowa, he was the quarterback at South Dakota State. And but the personnel at Wazoo is almost completely different, except for the 3 running backs: Angel Johnson, Kirby Voorhees, and Maxwell Woods. He brought over a tight end as well, but otherwise it's been a completely different personnel set. They haven't necessarily recruited. They didn't recruit these guys for their system, and so you have a bunch of offensive linemen who are used to like an air raid type system, and they're not as great at run blocking. You have a quarterback in Zevi Eckhouse who's interception prone. If he doesn't throw that pick 6 on Saturday, forget the second half of a slow offense. Wazoo wins that game because the defense only gave up 17 points and Wazoo was able to score 20. And so that's a 20-17 win if you just take away that pick 6. And obviously, domino the fact other things could have happened in that game. But Eckhouse, it was just a really bad throw on his part. He was trying to force it over to Josh Meredith, and a corner just jumped the route and returned it 37 yards for a pick 6 in the second quarter. And so for all the beautiful throws, Eckhouse had some beautiful completions to Tony Freeman, like that 48-yarder and 18-yarder along the sideline. He had some great throws, really special plays, as Rogers called them, but he also had some just unforgivable mistakes, which did not benefit his team.
So basically, you're saying is give him time, let him get his own guys, let him recruit the guys that he thinks fit the system best, and then give him another year or two to build this offense.
I think another year for Coach Freund would be worthwhile. Now, the case for not doing that is just that even with the lack of the personnel, Rogers has said, time and time again, they want to be aggressive, and then time and time again, they haven't been as aggressive. It's almost like the reverse of what the Seahawks went through with Ryan Grubb, where they wanted to run the ball, and they kept passing it, and with Geno Smith and failing. In this case, they want to mix it up and be aggressive, maybe take a few more shots down the field or whatnot, whatever the situation presents, and they're continuing to just kind of run the ball, pass it when they have to, and be very conservative and just not as creative within the scope. Now, Rogers said, they had 226 yards in the first half against James Madison, not as many yards, obviously, in the second half, just 3 points, 17 points, 3 points. And so the Cougars are capable. They have, they have the plays, they have the personnel to score, 17 points and a half because they just did it. But but when it comes to responding to whatever, James Madison is able to figure them out, and their opponents are able to figure them out, and it all comes down to, as Rogers said, Wazoo needing to have answers to the answers. So the defense will answer, will counter to whatever Wazoo's doing that's working. And then the offense so far, in very few occasions, has been able to answer the answer and win from there.
So before we close it out, just give me a quick little preview about Oregon State coming to Washington State this weekend to Pullman.
Yeah, so this is part 2 of the Pac-2 championship. Interim coach Rob Akey, former Idaho coach and Wazoo assistant, is obviously in his final week leading the Oregon State Beavers. There's quite a bit of rumors swirling. The Montana State coach flew to Portland and was cornered by a reporter and didn't reveal why he was in Portland, but it's likely, to interview for that Oregon State job. And so the Beavers are expected to announce the head coach probably after their game, maybe before, but probably after that game. But regardless of what will be, that won't necessarily impact what's on the field on Saturday. And what will be on the field on Saturday is a team in the Oregon State Beavers that beat Wazoo 10-7 a month ago in Corvallis. And so this unit was very capable of doing that again. But Wazoo is also, obviously they have a really bad, they went 1-5 on the road this year. They're 4-1 at home. And so I think this game sets up to be more like the Toledo and Louisiana Tech game, more like the Toledo game we saw, where the Wazoo defense is excellent at home, especially excellent at home, and the offense will find that fourth quarter drive, that 6.5 minute drive or whatever, to ice the game and put the ball in the end zone in the fourth quarter and win. And so I think that's what's going to happen. I think it's maybe going to be a 1-score game again, but I think Wazoo comes out on the other side on this one.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Sam, for telling me about that so much. Again, this is the Final Whistle podcast. It's Sam Taylor, our WCB writer. I'm Trevor Junt, the Idaho beat writer. Thank you for a good season of us covering college football. We have obviously one more week with WSU, but Idaho's finished. And we look forward to, I hope you look forward to reading our stories at sports@lmtribune.com. Again, I'm Trevor Junt. That's Sam Taylor, and this has been the Final Whistle.